Well, we've been talking a lot about the political positioning around Ukraine, but let's look at the humanitarian issue now. We now understand that 1 million people have flooded out of Ukraine in the past week since the Russian invasion began. It's created a humanitarian disaster of epic proportions. And with no sign of Russian aggression stopping and a number of key cities under attack, the situation is likely to get worse. Let's discuss the human cost of this ongoing conflict. I'm joined now by Laura Padoan, spokesperson for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Laura, thank you so much for your time. What are the latest numbers about how many people are believed to have crossed over from Ukraine since the invasion began?
Good evening. Well, today we reached the tragic milestone of 1 million people who have fled to neighbouring Poland, Hungary, Romania and Slovakia. I mean, rarely have we seen an exodus of this scale and magnitude. What we're witnessing now in Ukraine is tremendous human suffering. Civilians are being targeted, civilian infrastructure is being targeted, and the number of casualties is rising incredibly quickly. We estimate that around 12 million people inside Ukraine are in need of assistance, and that if the conflict continues, up to 4 million people could cross into neighbouring countries as refugees. So it's an incredibly alarming situation.
At what point does the UNHCR help people who are displaced within their communities within a country like Ukraine?
Well, UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, we are active and present in Ukraine. First and foremost, our concern is for the safety of our staff. So until now, they have been staying and they have been delivering aid and assistance to people who have been forced to flee their homes. We've managed to set up reception points in the west of the country. So as people have been fleeing, we've been able to give out basic essentials, jerry cans, shelter, baby kits and hygiene kits to people who are on the move. But the problem is that our access, humanitarian access inside Ukraine is severely being hampered by the security situation. So our staff will stay and deliver aid while it's safe to do so. In the meantime, we are working with authorities in neighbouring countries to meet the refugees at the borders and provide them with assistance, with shelter, with basic essential goods, because most people are arriving with very, very little. Some of them have been waiting up to 60 hours in freezing temperatures to try to cross the borders. So they're arriving in really a state of fear, hunger, and cold.
What is the process once they cross the border? As you say, they often arrive really hungry, cold, obviously extremely stressed and anxious. Is the United Nations and other humanitarian organizations, I would imagine, are involved as well, able to look after everyone who's coming, particularly if you're expecting 4 million people possibly to cross over from Ukraine, never mind the people in distress still within the country? Is there going to come a time when the countries receiving them, Poland and Hungary you mentioned, I think, as well, are they going to say, we can't help anymore, this is too much? And are we getting close to that point?
Well, until now, neighbouring countries have been very generous in keeping their borders open. There isn't a sign at the moment that borders are likely to close. But as I say, the scale, the magnitude of the numbers of people crossing are really unprecedented in recent times. And the number of people arriving often in small towns and communities in border towns across Poland, Hungary, Moldova, Slovakia, Romania is often, too much for the authorities. But what we've seen are communities coming together, local authorities being incredibly generous with their support, with the assistance that they're offering, providing temporary accommodation. So we really hope that continues. We are rushing staff to the areas, and we are delivering aid. We've had airlifts of aid and core relief items in Moldova. And on Tuesday, we launched our UN emergency appeal for $1.7 billion in order to be able to assist the needs of people as they arrive.
One thing that we spoke to you when we had you on the programme a few days ago was concerns about how African people who were in Ukraine, when they arrive at these border posts, sometimes they're being pushed to the back of the queue. I wonder if you have an update on that, whether that situation has been resolved. Are any people being discriminated against because of the colour of their skin when they try and leave Ukraine?
Well, we are aware and are extremely concerned about reports of racism and discrimination of Africans, Asians, and other nationalities, either in Ukraine, people trying to leave the country, or when they're crossing into neighbouring countries. There are a large number of foreign students, migrant workers. There are also around 5,000 refugees and 2,000 asylum seekers in Ukraine, people who have already been displaced, who are incredibly vulnerable. We've made very, very clear to all authorities involved that there should be no discrimination between people who are fleeing, because asylum should be available to all, regardless of their nationality and race. And the UN High Commissioner, Filippo Grandi, has personally discussed this issue of racism at the borders at the highest levels of government. And measures have been put in place in Ukraine and in neighbouring countries to address this. So I can assure you that we are following up with authorities, with our partners, with people who have experienced racism. We're taking this matter incredibly seriously, and you know, even if there is one incident of discrimination, that is one too many. We have been informed that people are being able to cross. We have seen Africans and other non-Ukrainian nationals who are crossing into Poland and Hungary and other countries. So it's certainly not the case that everyone is being prevented from leaving.
Thank you so much for that update. We do appreciate it. Laura Padoan, spokesperson for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, telling us this evening that 1 million people have already crossed over from Ukraine, but they estimate there may be as many as 4 million people in total if the conflict continues who will try and leave, and they estimate there could be as many as 12 million people within Ukraine who are in distress as water and lights are cut off, as food becomes scarce. So it's a very worrying situation indeed.